It's currently the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation period, but President Trump keeps sending love calls to Kim Jong-un. The North Korea-United States summit fell through while I made this video, but President Trump still seems willing to meet later. When President Trump suggested a meeting, Kim Jong-un responded with missiles, plainly rude. Let's examine this issue today. Let's look now. First, President Trump keeps reaching out to North Korea. President Trump is again demanding North Korea denuclearize and lift sanctions as he did in his first term. On October 27th, on his private jet to Japan, President Trump was asked what the United States could offer in talks with Kim Jong-un. President Trump stated that the United States has sanctions and that this is quite a big issue to start discussions with. President Trump used the lifting of sanctions against North Korea as bait. This is the first time since President Trump was re-elected that he has specifically mentioned North Korea sanctions as an agenda item for a North Korea-United States summit. President Trump has repeatedly proposed talks to Kim Jong-un, but North Korea hasn't responded positively. He appears to be encouraging North Korea to negotiate by hinting that sanctions could be eased through talks. President Trump rejected North Korea's request to lift sanctions at the 2019 Hanoi summit. North Korea offered to dismantle Yongbyon for sanctions relief, but President Trump wanted all nuclear sites dismantled. The talks ended without a deal due to major disagreements. President Trump said sanctions on North Korea could be eased if Kim Jong-un attends the North Korea-United States summit. President Trump keeps reaching out to North Korea and made an even more surprising statement. On October 24, when asked about North Korea wanting recognition as a nuclear state before talks with the United States, President Trump said they are a kind of nuclear state and added they possess a lot of nuclear weapons. Of course, it seems that President Trump intended to say that they are a country with nuclear weapons. This statement caused quite a stir. For decades, the United States has not recognized North Korea as a nuclear state and insists on denuclearization. President Trump's recent remarks are completely at odds with these positions. President Trump likely didn't intend to officially recognize North Korea as a nuclear state under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. He appears to tolerate North Korea's nuclear weapons, and South Korea interprets President Trump's comments similarly. They see it as tolerating North Korea's nuclear weapons. Because of this, if talks between North Korea and the United States actually resume, there's analysis that it won't just be a simple denuclearization negotiation, but rather the United States will likely proceed in the form of an arms reduction negotiation, effectively recognizing North Korea as a nuclear power. Negotiations once centered on easing sanctions for North Korea's denuclearization, but now they focus on managing North Korea as a nuclear-armed state. President Trump is more aware of this than anyone. Since he recognizes that Kim Jong-un is highly unlikely to give up nuclear weapons completely, it seems he is aiming for realistic diplomatic achievements through negotiations to freeze and manage the nuclear program rather than eliminate it. Negotiations could have North Korea stop nuclear development and dismantle or disclose some weapons to inspectors, while the United States offers partial sanctions relief or security guarantees. In return, North Korea is likely to demand military concessions such as the suspension of joint South Korea-United States military exercises and the gradual reduction of United States troops stationed in South Korea. For President Trump, easing Korean Peninsula tensions through an agreement with Kim Jong-un is more practical and politically beneficial than aiming for complete North Korean denuclearization. The problem is that if this kind of situation develops, South Korea's security environment could become much more unstable than it is now. If the United States effectively recognizes North Korea as a nuclear-armed state, the Korean Peninsula will enter an era of nuclear balance. This means that North Korea will secure its regime's safety while possessing nuclear weapons, and the United States will define this as a manageable threat. If that happens, South Korea's strategic position will shrink significantly. Reducing United States forces in Korea risks weakening extended deterrence, making it easier for North Korea to use nuclear weapons. In this case, South Korea would have no choice but to consider tough options such as independent nuclear armament or the redeployment of tactical nuclear weapons to protect its own security. Ultimately, this trend is highly likely to trigger an arms race throughout Northeast Asia. For North Korea, gaining eased United States sanctions, military concessions, and recognition as a nuclear state would symbolize Kim Jong-un's realized dream of a nuclear-armed nation. As a result, if the North Korea-United States talks resume this time, it would go beyond simply being a dialogue for peace. It could mark the start of a complicated diplomatic game in which North Korea's nuclear weapons are accepted as a reality. The United States gains political achievements, and South Korea is left with security concerns. Therefore, a very cautious approach is needed. Of course, many experts believe that President Trump's proposal to ease sanctions alone will not be enough to achieve North Korea's actual denuclearization. North Korea today is not as desperate for sanctions relief as it was in the past. They've avoided diplomatic isolation and built survival strategies and alternative networks. In the past, sanctions from the United States or the United Nations would completely paralyze the North Korean economy, but now the situation is different. North Korea has already secured new sponsors, Russia and China. After the war in Ukraine, as Russia became isolated by Western sanctions, its relationship with North Korea actually became even closer. North Korea provides Russia with military supplies like shells, missiles, and weapon parts, and collaborates on joint ventures. In exchange, it gets food, oil, fertilizer, and machinery. Previously, North Korea depended on illegal ship-to-ship transfers or smuggling through other countries, but now Russia has become its official sponsor. North Korea can't get a better deal. Even with tough United States sanctions, Russia and China keep North Korea afloat by providing support. China hasn't abandoned North Korea. Their political alliance has actually grown stronger recently. Kim Jong-un attended China's Victory Day to display anti-American alliance ties and, through messages with Xi Jinping, reaffirmed their socialist brotherhood. This is a symbolic act by North Korea to strengthen its regime and diplomatic standing, but at the same time, it holds significant strategic meaning for China as well, as it aims to pull the Korean peninsula away from American influence. As a result, North Korea is no longer isolated by international pressure as it was in the past, but instead has established itself as part of the anti-Western alliance. Not only that, but North Korea has also achieved remarkable results in recent years in earning foreign currency through cybercrime. They hack global cryptocurrency exchanges to steal large amounts of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, then reinvest the funds into their nuclear and missile programs. North Korea uses multiple channels to evade sanctions and maintains basic economic self-reliance with Russia and China's tacit approval. So even with President Trump's offer of sanction relief, Kim Jong-un has no reason to hurry to negotiate. Actually, he's using the situation as leverage in negotiations. As Trump grows more impatient to meet, North Korea can demand more. The recent missile launches may reflect this. When President Trump asked to meet Kim Jong-un, North Korea responded by launching missiles instead of talking. This is not just a simple show of force, but a policy statement that they will not be swayed by your proposal. The timing was especially exquisite. It was right before President Trump visited South Korea ahead of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. The fact that North Korea carried out a provocation at this time was intended to block the possibility of a surprise summit by Trump in advance, and to show that they are the ones holding the initiative. In the end, this missile launch can be seen as an action symbolizing the power dynamics in the relationship between North Korea and the United States. Trump extended his hand, but Kim Jong-un pushed it away, signaling talks will only start on his terms. This attitude shows that North Korea has already shifted to a self-reliant survival system, so it no longer needs to depend on sanctions relief like it did in the past. In fact, it's not an exaggeration to say that North Korea is now in a relatively advantageous position where it can decide whether or not to return to the negotiating table, even more so than the United States. However, there are clearly opposing opinions as well. No matter how much Russia and China support North Korea, the economic benefits are far from enough to achieve the level of economic development that Kim Jong-un desires. For Kim Jong-un, seeking rapid economic growth, easing sanctions is very appealing. Additionally, it's clear Kim Jong-un may agree to a summit, believing talks with the Trump administration, interested in summit diplomacy, could help North Korea gain recognition as a nuclear-armed state. However, experts agree that denuclearization is no longer possible through sanctions relief or peaceful means. The problem is that all of this diplomatic maneuvering is happening without South Korea's involvement. The results of the negotiations between President Trump and Kim Jong-un will ultimately determine the balance of security on the Korean peninsula, but South Korea itself is not taking a leading seat at the negotiating table. When United States and North Korean interests align, South Korea is reduced to just accepting the results, not deciding them. If President Trump discusses reducing United States troops in Korea or joint military exercises for political reasons, it would significantly impact South Korea's security, not just serve as a diplomatic gesture. North Korea would use that announcement to claim United States recognition and boost internal unity through propaganda. Security concerns will likely increase South Korean public support for nuclear weapons. Trump-style diplomacy is especially risky because it's unpredictable. He often uses diplomatic messages as political events rather than calculating them as strategies between countries. To enhance his achievements, he could hold another summit with Kim Jong-un and use the Republic of Korea-United States alliance or United States troops in Korea as bargaining chips. Here, the South Korean government would only be informed after decisions were made without prior consultation. At the Hanoi summit, the United States didn't inform South Korea of negotiation details beforehand, so South Korea learned the specifics only after the results were announced. If this pattern continues, South Korea may be forced into reactive diplomacy, following the United States and North Korea instead of shaping its own security strategy. Currently, President Trump keeps sending love calls to Kim Jong-un, but Kim Jong-un does not seem to be responding. What do you think about the current situation? Please let us know in the comments. That's all for this video. Thank you.